This week, we're diving into one of the most debated questions in Dynasty startup rooms. Do you draft to win right away in year one or punt early and build for long-term domination? We're talking startup roster construction, risk tolerance, age cliffs, value windows, and how to navigate the tension between proven veterans and unproven upside. Producer, hit it! Welcome to the Dynasty Pulse on Fantasy Sports Advice Network and the Undroppables, and on terrestrial radio 101.5, talking West Tennessee, 101.5 FM. This is the finest collection of knowers of ball in the industry. There's stiff competition out there, but we're stiffer. It's been a long week, but we're rejuvenated, so lock in. We're about to wild out and hammer down to get you bricked up. I am bigz, a.k.a. Hoomst Humongous. And with me in the Hall of Ball Knowledge, my clowns from another circus. I got Schultzy, I got Grindberg, I got Rice Baby, a.k.a. Chev 90, and I got Coach Retzlaff, a.k.a. Elijah Moore season. What's up, fellas?
Yes, what is up?
What's up, bigz? I don't know what to do with my hands or my voice.
It's 21 degrees Celsius in my house.
Yeah.
Nice. It's so hot.
It's a lot warmer than that in my pants when I think about Rashee Rice in 2025.
What does 21 degrees Celsius translate to in American temperature?
Let's do the math here. Carry the 1, carry the 2.
69 degrees.
69 degrees, guys.
Right.
So we are ready to rock here. Room temperature here in Canada. And we're getting into the crossfire where we're going to be heating things up tonight, and we're going to light it up. We're going full crossfire. This segment isn't just about hot takes. It's not about clicks. It's about putting dynasty strategy under the microscope where each of us will challenge each other on the panel. No scripts, no layups, just real talk. We're going to do, dynasty startup roster construction, risk tolerance, age cliffs. We are going to go crossfire here. It's thinking dynasty here, folks. Let's go, Schultzy, with the segment starter. All right.
I want to be probed.
There it is, the probing section. And Schultzy, let's get it started with your question to the panel here, or to Chev, it looks like.
All right. My question here for you, legendary ball nover, Chevdonius Maximus. Do you enter startup drafts with a specific strategy in mind, or do you kind of keep the options fluid? Are you looking at strategies maybe like zero RB, leaning into quarterbacks heavy at the beginning, win now, going super young? Or are you letting outside factors determine how things play out, such as draft slot, who you're playing with, who the league mates are, and board value?
It's a great question, Schultzy, Schultzy, Schlut Bucket. I'm sorry. All right, so yeah, that's a great question. And the one thing that's a constant is that I try to, if I'm in a league, like we're all in a league together, we all kind of know who we like and don't like, which makes it an advantageous position to be in. And it also puts you at a disadvantage because you know who I like in what range, because we've talked about this ad nauseum for months now, and there's no new information to go off of outside of the, landing spots for the rookies. So the one thing that I try to make sure that the build makes sense. So if if the board's leaning a certain way and value at a certain position is on the board, I'm going to take that value 9 times out of 10. If I don't come in with a preset strategy. I mean, I know in a super flex, if you got a top 3 pick, one of those picks is going to be a quarterback, or in my opinion, it should be. But beyond that, I don't really have a hard and fast, like I'm going to do this. I have selected a lot of Bijan Robinson. He's now my 5th most owned Dynasty player across however many leagues I'm in. And I like making that selection in the back end of the first round. I played a lot of third round reversals, so I prefer to be at the back, past pick 8 on, in any sort of third round reversal. But other than that, I try to stay fluid. If there's it's more so tiers and value versus just being rigid in a process. So that's the way that I approach it. I hope that answered your question in the most convoluted way possible.
It does. I love it.
Well, I think you really just have to be malleable to what Chev is saying.
Ooh, malleable.
Yeah, you love that, right? And yes, you're going to go dive in, have your take on Bijan Robinson. But the beauty is, this is just a point in time where Chev is. And let's say there's 10 teams for simplicity's sake. We're not going to do Canadian math here. It's 10 shares of Bijan. Well, there's going to be entry point there for Chev. Along the way, it could be mid-season on a team that's going down the tank and somebody gets a haul for him. And then Chev has 3 first-round picks. Name the haul, right? That can happen. So it's right now, that's how many players Chev might have as far as Bijan shares. But down the line, there's going to be all these exit points where he can still have a high percent share, 6 or 7 of those 10 still, and sprinkle in different strategy for those 3. So even if you're overexposed at a certain point, you can still have different exit points. So we talk about entry points all the time, and there's exit points. I think that's just a concept that it's not as sticky for people. People think of it as too sticky versus being fluid. January, wrap around the entire calendar. There's all different times a year where you're saying, hey, go out and sell Rachaad White. Go out and buy Rachaad White. Remember the Bucky Irving, Rachaad White wars we had? Well, at this part of the calendar, Rachaad White presents as a tremendous buy. So I'll leave it to the floor.
Yeah. Well, first of all, 10 teams is 13.74 Canadian. And I'm scared that we're kind of bleeding into my question, because I think Schultzy might have read my question before he asked his. So, Chev, do you have a question for Grindberg?
I do have a question for the one that they call Grindberg, Mr. Lindberg, if I may.
Yeah, you may. Please.
You're on the clock in a startup, and you're at the point of the draft that informs your decisions from a roster building perspective. Do you find yourself clicking the button on younger assets that'll take a step forward? Or are you banking on proven vets, knowing that you'll have to seek to replace those players in the shorter term, 1 to 2 year windows? And I have a follow-up question after that, after your response.
Okay, well, that's a really good question, because, especially in the dynasty market right now, in startups, especially, like it changes year by year. A lot of guys back in the day were able to trade out of their first round, and just like in the Grindberg Invitational, people were trying to get out of their first round picks pretty fluently, especially in the first 5, but no one was budging, because people aren't exactly attuned to wanting to give up any sort of value at that stage. So people are at a stage now where they're losing value if they want to trade out of the first. So for me, what I try to do, especially in the early stages of my draft, especially in the first 10 rounds, I'm going to build around cornerstone players. I want that foundation, the stability, guys I trust to anchor my lineup or retain value. At this point, unless you're willing to outright lose on a trade, like I mentioned in the first round, it's incredibly tough to move out of the actual value. Everyone knows what those cornerstone pieces are worth, and nobody's really given up the type of stats or overpay it takes to justify passing on them. So that's why I've learned and I've leaned into making those early picks count, locking in a foundational guy, a guy that I trust, setting the board to come to me later on where I can hunt the value, take calculated shots, and build my edges around those margins. When I get into the mid rounds in the part of the draft, I almost always clicking the upside button. I want to be the one rostering the breakout before it happens, not the one trading for future picks after they leap. That's the sweet spot where I start placing calculated bets, not just filling out the depth chart, I'm taking players about to, take off. Players like I did last year, like Jaden Daniels, Lad McConkey, and Chase Brown. Those are the guys that flashed enough to me to suggest there's more in the tank than opportunity opens up. So I'm not chasing the youth. I've got it. I'm chasing, the traits that matter: explosiveness, target potential, clarity in the depth chart. And those boxes aren't checked, I'm passing on them. But if they are, I'm gladly swinging a miss, because if one of those hits, it makes them a 3 to 4 round jump in startup at ADP next season. So that's what I'm looking at that stage there, Chev.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I guess the follow-up question is now we've got the plan. Now we need the plan in case the plan doesn't work. So if a guy doesn't take a step forward or gets off to a slow start or doesn't live up to the hype, we'll use the highest end example of this we have in the game right now. We'll say Marvin Harrison Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Are you likely to remain? Where's your panic meter at? We talked about thermostats before the episode.
Yeah.
Are you a thermostat or are you a thermometer when it comes to the temperature on a player that's underperformed?
Well, I mean, as a chef, I'm always looking at temperatures, and I'm very attuned to that. I could tell you, ratios in Fahrenheit and Celsius, so it don't matter. I'm versed at all of it, and I'm a versed dynasty player. So if a young player isn't showing real signs of growth by week 6 or 8, I'm increasing to, move on from them. If they're not increasing their snap share, their routes run, their red zone usage, I'm not going to wait around hoping. That's when I start, exploring trade packages or pivoting to someone on a more uptick track. I've learned the hard way with guys like Sky Moore, Kamani Vidal, and George Pickens that have had off-season hype and early round buzz, but there was never any actual traction. And by the time you realize it, the market's moved on and you're left holding a roster clogger. There's a real difference between being patient and being stubborn. And I'm holding a guy just because I like them pre-draft. I'm going to try and move on for them if I can. But, guys in Dynasty right now, they're pretty savvy to these moves. So they'll know if I'm trying to move on from a guy beforehand, but, try and get that happening before that happens. So yeah, that's my situation there.
Hey, Mike, follow up to the follow-up. When you have a player that goes onto the back burner because you can't get rid of them, how do you find a second peak in their career to unload them? And how do you deal psychologically with, hey, I was going to sell this player at this peak. There's a dip. They're on the back burner now, Mr. Chef. And then they have another spike in their career, but it's not going to be the price that you could have sold out for. How do you handle that psychology of selling for not yesterday's price, today's price actually going down, but you see a little influx of surge? How do you handle that when you have a player who goes back end to the back burner, they're dead on your roster, but then they come back to life when they previously had such high hype?
Well, you know what? Sometimes the best dishes come, from just spontaneous. Sometimes that back burner stock turns into something beautiful. And a guy like Justin Fields happened a couple of years ago where, I chose him at the 108 in a startup 2 years ago. Maybe my process was off. You can't just fold at that stage. You're trying to offload them, but no one's going to pay the price that you're willing to take for him, because I'm thinking him as a value an asset that I paid a huge value for here. And now 3 years later, a championship later, I made some moves to get around that, and now he's my QB3 sitting here, and he's got that ton of upside. So I've had offers for him, and I'm ready to pull the trigger on something at this stage where that value now is back to almost similarly to where it was, not quite that first round at this stage, but give him a season in New York where a guy like bigz, who has Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Mason Taylor, all as top 10 plays here. A guy like Justin Fields is going to pull into that, and if he can solidify that type of stage, he's back into that round 1 next year because, you know, he's a top 5 quarterback at that stage. So sometimes it's being patient in that moment, and not panic on a guy that, you know, sometimes your process takes a little bit longer to happen with, and it's happened in the past.
Now, I'd like to follow up to the follow up, and the beauty of Dynasty is that a lot of times you have a dead cat bounce or a post hype sleeper where they do return value after a dead period. So you can be high on a guy going into a rookie draft. You pick him, and then he does nothing on your taxi squad. Then you have to promote him, and he does nothing in year 2. And then he sees a tick in upside in year 3, and he's valuable in that you can start moving him. We have a whole bunch of shares of Roshan Johnson and Kendre Miller. They're running backs entering their year 3, and they have returned absolutely nothing from their back end first round, high end second round value in their rookie drafts. But if one of them happens to pop off, you're sitting on a gold mine because they haven't been movable in the past. And so we're looking for, especially in startups, those dead cat bounces to finally come through. I notice, Coach, you have in your little on-screen title, Elijah Moore season. That's exactly who I'm talking about. Is a guy like Elijah Moore who comes out and looks like a route genius in his rookie season and then disappears, crosses teams, goes to another team. He's now on his 3rd team. He's had a career similar to Tyler Lockett, and guess what Tyler Lockett did? He broke out in year 5. Where's Elijah Moore at? So things like that happen. You just have to be the one holding on to them. And there's a saying in Dynasty, I'm not often wrong. I'm just early or late.
Yeah, exactly.
So a follow-up to the follow-up to the follow-up to the follow-up. If you get stuck with one of these guys, yeah, buddy. If you get stuck with one of these dudes who you were trying to move early and you just can't make it happen, are you the type of guy who's willing to sell off for pennies at some point, or are you gonna cling to maybe something happening and risk letting him die on your roster?
Well, I'm a top, so I'm never gonna take pennies on the dollar.
Sometimes it's just like there's such thing as selling low. You know what I mean? And, you know, you just got to cut your losses at some point, like I did with Sky Moore. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to let him sit there. You're going to have to bite your bullet. You're not going to let him sit on your bench. You know, I mean, maybe there's tougher calls than that down the line. And maybe if you come up with one, I can maybe make that decision. But sometimes you just got to, you know, cut your losses and just move on, because even though you play with your heart, a lot of the time, Dynasty and just in general, this is a cutthroat kind of business, and you just gotta sometimes move on and, you know, admit when you're wrong. And sometimes it's hard to do. And the best Dynasty players can admit when they're wrong and move on. And just like anything in life, really, you know, if you could really own in on your weaknesses and improve on them, that makes you even stronger. So yeah, let's go.
You came for the Dynasty content. You're leaving with life advice. I love it.
There we go. All right. Well, let's hear from our sponsor, Schultzy. The Fantasy Sports Advice Network's got a lot cracking on right now, so let's hear from it.
We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today.
Not only do you get unlimited access as a pro member, you also get qualifications to our jersey leagues. And I'm pretty sure all 5 of us are going to have our own individual jersey leagues. So if you think you can beat one of us and take home that autographed jersey, bring it.
And then one more thing here. Maybe we should consider doing a Dynasty Pulse listener league startup. You know, let's maybe get some listeners in on that, and maybe we can make a jersey league out of it. So anybody that wants to get in, you know, just message us in the chat with Schultzy. No, I'm not going to say it. No, just message in the chat, and we'll get you in the league if you're interested, and DM us, and we'll get you in one of the Jersey leagues, which will be a Dynasty Pulse only invitational. It'll be awesome, and it'll be a Dynasty startup that you'll be able to get into and participate in as long as you are a premium member. Now, bigz, I got a probing question for you, my man.
Probing.
All right, so what's more dangerous in a startup? Overvaluing youth,
Switchblade.
overvaluing youth, or
Is it prison rules?
It's prison rules. It's all that.
I
Gloves
didn't
are
know we
on.
were playing prison rules.
It's the probe, man. Prison rules are on. All right. So back to my question. What's more dangerous in a startup? Overvaluing youth or overestimating a contender window that might close before it opens? Let's unpack this a
Can you
little bit.
expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to unpack it. Okay. So on one hand, we see managers chase youth like it's the only currency that managers, rookie fever, second-year breakout hype, and dynasty Twitter darlings can lead people to stack raw, unproven players, guys like Jameson Williams, JJ McCarthy, or RJ Harvey at the expense of production. The result? A perma rebuild roster with no reliable weekly floor and no clear path to contending anytime soon. And on the flip side, some managers build like they're trying to win a redraft league, loading up on aging veterans like Barkley, Henry, Davante Adams. They think they're contending, but one injury or a team regression later, and suddenly they're stuck with a depth, like a deceiving type of asset. Now, with no end in sight, what is the mistake that is more costly to you? And overcommitting to upside that may never materialize, or betting on a win now core that turns into a roster cliff by year 2?
I think it's the second one, the latter, if you will. If you go all in on a win now roster and you have a collection of running backs that fall off the cliff, you have a collection of wide receivers that get hurt, and quarterbacks that are inefficient and lose their jobs, I think that's a little bit more devastating. If you have a ton of really young assets, like we talked about earlier, you can get a dead cat bounce, you can get a post-hype player that, one of the biggest things for me over the last couple of years has been the Cam Akers and Trey Sermon effect. Like, there has never been a point where those guys had actual value on the field, but they had short periods of time where, preseason Trey Sermon gets signed to a new team and all of a sudden people are picking him up off waivers and he's being included in trades. Cam Akers is another one, not going to produce whatsoever, but do carry some value. If you are drafting very young, you can run into some of those players even while you're blindfolded. But if you are taking a whole bunch of guys who wind up ending their careers while they're on your roster, there's nothing you can do. You're dead in the water. So I would defer to the youth movement rather than the veterans, but you just kind of have to make the right call on those veterans, like the people who were drafting Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry last year in startups. They nailed it. The people who were drafting Joe Mixon not quite so much. So it's dynasty. We all have takes, and there's luck and there's not luck, and it's not a matter of a player being bad or good. It's a matter of when their value is beneficial to you, whether that's in your roster or with trade value, etc. But I'd rather have the young guys.
I'm on the other side of that. I think if we look at all the draft classes that come in and you say X percentage of players actually hit, and you just load up on all rookies and second year guys, well, the percentages are playing out where you're going to have a roster that, 40% hits or whatever the number may be, versus if you're going to snag some bets here, like you're drafting these vets who are sliding and what they're capable of. Like, you've seen it happen.
No, I know what you're saying. The thing is, though, that in a struggle, you can always take some of those Cam Akers and Trey Sermons and trade them off for lesser known vets who are going to have a big bounce back. So a couple of years ago, Jameson Williams wasn't really, after his rookie season, he wasn't really on the radar, but you probably could have gotten him in a postseason trade or preseason trade including a late round draft pick and a Trey Sermon, and then all of a sudden you're in on Jameson Williams breakout. So I think that if you have a guy who's retiring, that's not quite as valuable as somebody who, had a whole lot of potential, but is just changing their environment.
I agree with that. I have to refute your point there about Joe Mixon clicking the button on Joe Mixon. Now, personally, I agree with the philosophy. I'm not too keyed up about taking guys that are older, unless they're extremely hyper productive. Davante Adams in startups. But Joe Mixon was the RB1 through week 11 last year. So I would say that it felt pretty good. And he ended up being about 17 points. Now, did he screw people in the fantasy playoffs? Absolutely. But the Texans as a whole screwed people
people don't forget.
The reason I brought up Joe Mixon is because last year he was somebody that I was a little bit too early on calling his demise, and he did come out of the gate and absolutely tear stuff up, and then he fell off. So it reminds me of a couple of years ago where there was an argument, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, who is the wide receiver one, and a whole lot of people got out on the end of their skis and said, I'm making the Jamar Chase flag plant. And what wound up happening is that, yes, Jamar Chase did outscore Justin Jefferson because Jefferson got hurt, but then Chase got hurt and ended lots of playoff seasons. So the guys that went in on Saquon, the guys that went in on Derrick Henry, the guys that went in on Joe Mixon, they all had kind of the same look at things. And Joe Mixon helped them get to the playoffs. But the reason I was out on Joe Mixon was because of the propensity for him to be injured. And that's exactly what happened. He missed a bunch of time. So I also had that that's why one of the reasons I didn't draft a whole lot of Saquon or Derrick Henry last year. They went on to become league winners, but I kind of had the same attitude with them as I did with Joe Mixon. And there's a lot in Dynasty. There's a lot of getting out in front of it one year and then having to pull back. Just like Grindberg said, you have to know when you're wrong. You have to admit that when you're wrong. So with Brian Thomas Jr., last year I was out on him for certain reasons, and I had to kind of backtrack on that because I know that I was wrong. So what made me wrong, and what can I do this year to kind of change my assessment of players and try and find a Brian Thomas Jr. rather than think that I know everything that's going to happen. Now I'm trying to uncover, hey,
beautiful.
Well, what's the edge here? What is the market inefficiency here? And that's my Dante Thornton.
And Schultzy is going to have to figure that out this year with Brian Thomas Jr. when he's wrong on him. So we'll revisit that one.
Whoa.
All right, bigz, you got a question there for our coach here?
I do. And I hope none of this is bleeding in from anyway. Coach, how you doing?
How we doing?
That was it. That was my question.
Just being malleable.
No. So what I want to know is how hard you hold on to your initial draft strategy. We've talked a lot about being able to pivot and being malleable and stuff. But while you're in draft and there are trends happening, sometimes you're in win now and a position run starts and your current tier is light at that position. Do you ever go in thinking win now and then pivot to productive struggle if your veteran targets get wiped out? Or do you ever think I'm working productive struggle in this startup and then pivot to, okay, well, if these guys are available to me, I'm taking Davante Adams and I'm going to go beat everybody?
So early informs late. You got to be malleable along the way. And part of what can inform late, if I'm building on younger core running backs and it's super flex, top tier quarterbacks, I get my base there. If I have to catch up at wide receiver, well, guess who's going to pay the cost age-wise? Because those hammers, those Brian Thomas Jr.'s are going to get sniped and taken away. The hammer receivers and Justin Jefferson, Chase, they're all going to run down to Lab McConkey. So at that point, you're going to have pocket values that come up. I mean, a couple guys that come to mind right now, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin at his age. There are certain players who are up there in age, but they present a good value in the middle to later single-digit rounds. And then you just have to make that decision because, hey, I bought what I did early, so I have to pay what I have later. If I make an inverse decision, I can go hammer receiver early on with my quarterbacks. And then when I'm searching for running backs, I'm flipping over the high upside rookies. And then, Chev, you've talked about it too, where the depressed price happens for the older veteran players. You can find those pockets of players as well. So the cheapness as the board goes down is just going to be informed on if you're in a very good league, which the Grindberg Invitational prioritizes. You could prioritize tight end with a 1.75 tight end premium, the super flex element. You go hard at the receivers, but there's 3 receivers starting, and then of course flex positions, and then there's the points per carry bonuses for the running backs. Really what ends up happening in a lot of super flex leagues is you can pick 2 or 3 that you build hardcore towards, and you have to punt at a certain position, and it's got to be all right. And if you go 1-1-1-1 and try and be balanced, I think that's where a lot of leagues can lap you, because those positional runs and tiers end up happening.
Well, then I'm punting tight end.
Okay, so put it this way: there's 4. You're in a league like that. That's good. I'm glad this kind of came up. You're in a league where you have all 4 positions that have somewhat equal incentive, or you can build from that base and find a way to win. And then you've got 12 different people, and how many people are going to apply that strategy? Ideally, you would have 3 people each go hard at tight end, 3 at QB. If it was all exactly even, but these aren't Canadian numbers here. But bigz, you said tight end, you would punt, you would veer towards the other 3. I'll go around the room. Schultzy, where though there's the even incentive on all 4 positions, where would you start early? In what position would you want to have those pocket values later? As to what I was mentioning about the receivers, about the depressed running back prices, what position do you want to pay some of the depressed prices in a startup?
Probably running back. It offers a lot of good depressed value because you're going to get guys, 6th, 7th round. We've seen Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, dudes who you're going to step in and be instant big time producers for you. And I think tight end's a sneaky one too. Like there's just a lot of value. Like if you're not going to snag one of those top tier upper echelon dudes, like I'm inclined to wait a tight end scoop value later there.
Yeah, that's why I sometimes I like going hard at tight ends, but when I'm looking at ADPs at this point and I'm getting Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith much later, at even Evan Ingram, his potential in Denver, I'm getting them in the teen rounds rather than spending, I'd rather spend on a wide receiver or a running back who's going to be a high volume guy and then get those sleeper tight ends later.
I love that line of thinking, because part of this is I don't want to miss the train ride to certain destinations. And at a certain point, in order for me to have Brock Bowers, I have to select him. So with the first overall pick, I think I was 7th, I went and got myself Brock Bowers in a startup. So part of this is just, hey, my experience, this is one mirror league, accordion out. I have so many others. Let's call it 10, right? I want to make sure that I don't miss a ride on having Brock Bowers. And part of that degree is, hey, you don't have Jamar Chase unless you actually physically click him. Grindberg, what's your take? What do you like to lead off early when there's incentive kind of equal for all 4 positions? And what pocket do you like to pick up?
Well, I mean, for me, depending on where I'm drafting too, because like if I'm in the top half of the draft, it's really hard at this stage to trade out of it. I mean, you're almost destined to pick one of those top guys unless you're losing value. So if I can get a middle to later round pick, I'm in your boat here with picking that Brock Bowers situation here, because he showed what he could do his first year as a rookie, leading the league in targets. There's an insane amount of upside here for a guy that is so young, and the longevity there. He could just literally be the Travis Kelce of that position for the next decade, and that upside and leading that is something that I'm willing to buy into, just seeing what that potential is. And it's not like a flash in the pan like Sam Laporta was. Brock Bowers earned those targets. He had touchdown upside, and now he's getting a better system with him. wheels up for him. I'm looking for the best value here, and a guy that, especially in the first round, that I know is going to be on my team for a long time. That's what I'm looking for. So for me in a startup, I'm having a hard time picking a running back because of how shortened their careers are, especially in fantasy football. I'm looking for a guy, whether it's a quarterback that, is young and shows maybe a pocket presence, that doesn't have that rushing upside, or a guy that is a game changer that's going to win me a league, like a Lamar Jackson or a Jaden Daniels or a Brock Bowers for this instance, that is just going to dominate a position for a number of years and make you the difference maker. And that's what a Brock Bowers will do here for you. And I was really savvy on your pick there at 107. I thought he would actually go a little bit earlier in our startup, and he didn't. And especially with the tight end premium at 0.75, that was a smash pick.
And another thing on top of that, you mentioned the touchdown upside. Funny enough, 5 touchdowns for Brock Bowers. So even if the targets regress and he runs double-digit touchdowns, it's going to even out to about the same. So I really like the shot of Brock Bowers, player take-wise, to repeat his production fantasy-wise for us, just in a different manner possibly. But then again, he gets a quarterback upgrade in Geno Smith. Before I kick it over to Chev to get his idea on this concept and this theory, the one thing that happens when there is this run that I like to think of on these older positions where you're like, okay, I'm going to pay a depressed price, but they're also going to be up in age. So I'm going to have to get younger at some point on my path in this dynasty. The beauty is, so long as you either compile some extra picks or don't trade away your next year's picks. So right now it would be 2026 rookie picks. You are always going to be in a position to get younger for your team. So if you can scaffold a team where 3 out of your 4 positions of the QB, running back, tight end, receiver are young, and you have to patchwork youth somewhere, the beauty is you have that understanding, the bird in hand, is those rookie picks will come your way. So that's where I would say you don't want an entire, and this goes back to some other questions we had, you don't want an entire roster to be overloaded with older players, but I think you can get away with some positions being older in the fact that you can reload with those rookie picks, but just understand you don't want to have to scaffold an entire team for youth. That's how it kind of gets out of balance. Now, Chev, this concept of there's equal incentive, kind of like the Grindberg Invitational. I think you went with, was it Bijan? Yep. So, hey, there you go. I could have guessed blindly because any league you're in, you're eyeing him. If he's on the board, you're sniping him. You have great takes on him, full conviction. I love your pick. We can make an argument for your pick over my pick of Brock Bowers. But which direction do you like to go? Is it running back right now, unilaterally, or broadly? What do you like to do? And then what's that pocket that you'd rather pay the depressed price at the moment?
I've been pretty, like I said, I like to be in the back half of that first round so I don't have to make the choice between Jalen Hurts and Jamar Chase, or, Jalen Hurts or Justin Jefferson. Yeah, that I don't like being in that range. So I like having a little bit more clarity. That way there's a possibility I could start a draft off with Bijan and Genty, or if I get really lucky, Bijan and Gibbs. If Gibbs makes it, or they both make it to the 112 and I'm the 112, they're not making it any further. Problem is sometimes Bijan goes like 1-8 and Jahmyr Gibbs goes like 112. I just like started out that way. I'm more than comfortable waiting and selecting, waiting on tight ends and selecting tight ends a little bit later. And in those middle rounds, like 6, 7, 8, I've been coming away with a ton of Jameson Williams, another player that I'm extremely bullish on, early on through, well, I guess as we get into redraft season, but in Dynasty, I'm extremely bullish on Jameson Williams. I feel like he's going to take a massive step forward this year from the breakout year of 2024, where he averaged 14 points a game. So I'm comfortable pushing down tight end. I have some targets that I really like, Tucker Kraft being one of the primaries. And then if you want to wait a little bit later, you can go get a Ben Sinnott in the 12th, 13th round. And then late, 16, 17, 18, you can take our guy, Oronde Gadsden the second. We're getting some steam. It may not hit year one, But now you've got 3 tight ends. You've got 1 tight end that's going to be good in your lineup. Tucker Kraft, extremely efficient last year. They're projecting him to take another step forward. So I'm not paying those premium prices for a Brock Bowers, even though it is a tight end premium. I think I can get a guy who could give me around, if he takes a step forward, 12 to 13 points a game in full PPR and Tucker Kraft. And I'm taking some shots on some guys who I like because I think that tight end has a longer shelf life, and it takes longer because of the way the college football game is played. It takes longer for those guys to transition to the NFL. So I'm more comfortable waiting a little bit, taking a guy who can give me some production, and then I can go super late and take a Hunter Henry or something like that, just to ensure that I have a little bit of depth and points that can go into my lineup at the tight end position while these younger tight ends start to develop.
Well, to me, that's why
like you have a layered tight end room, and that's a cool concept that you just unpacked, because you got a guy who can get you the points now, a guy who can get you the physical points that just need to print, and then maybe it's somebody like Isaiah Likely or Michael Mayer, who it's like, hey, this guy could be a moonshot, but they're going to need some time. Last point on everything, we all kind of had, it's kind of funny enough, as I'm asking around the room, based on this was a startup we were all in, so conceptually, we all got to go down our different path. You know, like some of you went running back while I went tight end. Grindberg, you went quarterback early because you were part of what Chev said. It's depending on where you are positioned in the draft. Kind of like what Chev said, you hate that part of the Hurts chase because you're sitting there like, I might make the wrong decision, because there could be a wrong decision in there. It is kind of neat how, depending on the pocket of where you're at and what the board gives you, you get more clarity. So that is kind of a neat point for those listening at home to what Chev said. If you're beyond the 1-6 and you're in that latter third, especially, you can take advantage of what the room does for you and the mistakes that are made. That's why I love the 201 in rookie drafts, or the 202, 203, because there's always a guy who kind of should have been in the first round, but you get away with it. So awesome. Great job, gentlemen. I got more out of that than maybe you got out of me. So that's cool. I reverse.
All right, Chev. What's your question for Schultzy?
I have a question for Schultzy.
Oh, hey, no, it's me. Now, yeah, it's funny. I asked like 700 questions.
Yeah, I was like,
what's another?
You can't be up for another question, can you be?
Yeah, but you know what? I'm going to use Celsius numbers, so it doesn't matter. Schultzy, what are your thoughts on building dynasty squads? They're split in age, half youth, let's say 26 and under. You know, maybe Leo DiCaprio, right? 25 and under. And the rest being 26 and over conceptually. Let's say it's split even amongst all your positions. So you've got a young quarterback, you got an old quarterback, you got just mixtures there. It's very even. How do you balance keeping that team competitive and young at the same time as you're going year 1 to 2 to 3?
Well, I think I think it's a really pretty solid, sound strategy. It allows you to, take things as they come, and if your season's not going the way you want, you can start selling off some bets to people who are going to be able to use them. Okay. But like, if you're looking at a startup, I think this is a totally reasonable strategy to attack. We've talked about those first 3-4 rounds, you got to nail the core group of guys that you can just depend on for year in and year out. And then beyond that, like, you hit the rounds maybe like 6 through 8, and I think you can do a kind of split on rookies and vets here. There's still some solid, like this year, for example, you're going to find guys like Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka in that range, and you can pair one of those with a guy like a Derrick Henry, a Josh Jacobs, and Alvin Kamara, and you can get away with both sides of the coin in that range. Now, if we're talking startup builds here, rounds 9 to 11, this is where I'm buying all of the vet value. For instance, in the Grindberg Invitational, rounds 9 through 11 respectively, we saw Bashal 2 and 9, Jack Besh 10, Kyle Williams 11. There's potential there, right? But if you're going to go on the other side of the coin here and look at vets, round 9, Davante Adams, round 10, Calvin Ridley, round 11, Tony Pollard. So I think this is your sweet spot for veteran building. And then beyond that, you can start taking your shots at some more young guys. So I think it's a totally plausible strategy to go for. And then, years 2, 3, you just got to be on top of it, making sure you're going to move off of that if you can before the cliff really hits you. And then from there, if you're loaded up on youth, you can trade some of that youth for some vets, right? Like at the inverse. So as long as you're on top of, playing the room as the years come by, I think this is a totally doable strategy.
I love that you brought up that little area because rounds 9, 10, and 11 in that draft, I drafted David Njoku, Geno Smith, and then I traded out of a spot and dropped back and took Aaron Jones. And I think that's just the perfect encapsulation of taking advantage of the veteran value where it's supposed to be and not buying in on, those rookie backups in that area were Pat Bryant in round 12, Jack Besh in round 10. There were just some ridiculous overdrafts. Oh, I did draft Kyle Williams in round 11. Never mind. But anyway, my point stands. Like that's exactly right, Schultzy. That's where the veteran value is, and that's where you want to target it.
Well, look at where Schultzy went with round 9, Davante Adams. That's printing money immediately this year. And let's say that pick is gone. It's dust. It's just 1 year of Davante Adams, and that's it. He's cooked, and you can't get out of him on selling him. But it gets you a ship or gets you in the championship. It gets you third place money, whatever the structures are that allow you to play some kind of printing money where you're getting some kind of reward. Hey, you burned a 9th round pick. That's absolutely worth it, especially in year 1. And you turn around, hey, you paid your league fee, and maybe if you won the league, you've paid a couple years worth.
Yeah, I mean, that was a sweet spot in the draft where I think a lot of value was gained. And if you look at all our picks in that range, they were pretty savvy as far as where our rosters were and what veterans we picked at that stage. You mentioned the Bashal Tootin, but the pick I had right before him was Travis Etienne in round 8, which was a monstrous slide in my opinion when we're going to talk about our guys in that. And then you're getting the backup for that in years to come in that offense. And then I picked afterwards that was Tyreek in round 11. So, there's a lot of value there for guys that you could see there. And absolutely, that's the sweet spot for these veterans. And then when you can insulate them with the odd rookie in that range too, it's the best way to go. And a great way to get into our next segment here, guys, because it's been fire and it's been a great show so far. And we're going to get into some of the guys. Last week, we talked about some ADP guys that were kind of, fading and guys that we were missing on. And this week, we're going to talk about some values in these startups because, we talk about that all the time. And we've actually mentioned some of these players already in this show. So let's get into this now. Who's first on the docket here? I think it is... I don't know.
Chev.
Let's go, Chev. Who's your guy?
It's Tucker Kraft. I brought him up earlier. I brought him up for a reason. So I did a short early in the offseason where we talked about Matt LaFleur talking about a potential growth of role for Tucker Kraft. Now, the beautiful thing about that is Tucker Kraft finished as I believe like the tight end 11. He was 700 yards. He was 7 touchdowns. He ended up being 7th amongst tight ends in yards, but he was just 21st in targets. He only got 65 targets. So 65 targets per fantasy points data. Turn that into 700 yards. Love that. He was 2nd in yards per target amongst tight ends with at least 50 targets, behind only George Kittle with 10.88 yards per target. Same with yards per reception at 14.14. Then he led the league in yards after the catch per reception with 9.38. The second closest tight end was George Kittle at 6.71. So he's a monster after the catch. And he was 2nd in missed tackles forced per attempt. So at 0.28. So this is a guy to me that just screams, I'm going to break out. It's just whether or not, there's so much ambiguity with the passing situation. I think we've had Andrew Cooper on to talk about what you want from a tight end in terms of a consolidated target share. And there's so much question and so much uncertainty in Green Bay about who's going to be the lead dog. That leads me to believe that it could be Tucker Kraft because he's extremely efficient and good things happen when you give him the football. So if we're looking for someone to take a step forward to create mismatches in the passing game, to me, there's no better bet than Tucker Kraft based on what he was able to do this year or this past year and what Matt LaFleur has already said about him taking a step forward in terms of responsibility and target share moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chev, 100%. I was big on Tucker Kraft last year, and his yak ability kind of reminds me of kind of like a George Kittle kind of style of play here. Maybe not with the total upside and elite ability here, but as a top 10 tight end for sure heading in this year, and the young blood and the uncertainty with the wide receiver room here. There's not a bona fide number one wide receiver in that room right now, and maybe Matthew Golden with that first round pick here could turn into that. But Tucker Kraft's got everything we're looking for, the opportunity to be the number one target in that offense. There's nothing saying that he can't be that with so much uncertainty in that wide receiver room. So I really do like this call there, Chev. And Tucker Kraft is a guy that I have in a lot of dynasty rosters, and a guy that I'm pretty confident going into this season with like a backup plan, like you have mentioned in the previous segment here, with a solid backup, and then maybe another young rookie like a Rondé Gatson, like you mentioned. Love the call there. My guy here is back in the well here, boys, and I'm going to talk about Travis Etienne again here. And in 2025 startups, he's got a lot of upside for somebody that is not far removed from a top 10 finish. He's got the blend of explosive playmaking ability, especially when you consider his receiving upside and his history of volume when given the lead back role. That'll set him apart as a potential league winner if the opportunity opens up and he lands in a better situation, or being in a better situation within his own offense. He's very good at avoiding tackles per reception, second among all running backs over the last 3 seasons. It highlights his elusiveness, his receiving ability, even when, his overall production dips. Despite being down in 2024, he had more rushing avoided tackles in the league, and he also finished 3rd in total fantasy points, 7th in points per game in 2023, largely fueled by the volume. But he's proven he can produce at a high level even when he's a little bit banged up. But when he's healthy, he's the lead back. Etienne, he averaged 21 fantasy points per game in his 4 starts in 2022, and then in 2023 we mentioned that. And last year, yes, there was some competition over the last 6 weeks in 2024. Despite being in a committee, he still maintained a 52.5% snap share. That means that he can, play in these situations. He's the archetype that, is proven to be a first round draft capital. And that's something that, with the way he slid and what I see in this Liam Cohen offense, that, made a guy like Rashad White and Bucky Irving, completely on the map in the last couple of years. I just think that Travis Etienne could be back to where he was in years past, even though he's got some committee, potential here with Bashal Tutin and Tank Bigsby. But I just don't think that that's going to be a huge factor here. I think he's going to have the keys to start off the year. So I'm interested to see what some of you others, think about Travis Etienne headed into this year.
Love the call. I am, like we said, there aren't bad players, just bad situations. Travis Etienne was in a bad situation last year. His talent will overcome that, and I think Liam Cohen's going to do some wicked things with Travis Etienne.
I hope so. Okay, Biggs, who's your guy?
My guy is Mark Andrews. So we were talking about the tight end position. This is a guy that I was able to draft at the tight end 11 in our aforementioned Grindberg Invitational. Now, looking a little bit deeper, Mark Andrews in a full season has never finished below tight end 10. In fact, he's had single-digit finishes in every year that he's played every game. He technically did play every game last year, but there were 2 games that he came off the field because he was dealing with injuries related to a car accident in the preseason. And if you take away the first 4 weeks of the season, Mark Andrews is sitting at a 16.38 points per game. In fantasy, that's good for tight end 5. If I'm getting tight end 5 production out of a tight end 11 value, I'm going to do that every single time. Do not buy the fade on Mark Andrews. Isaiah Likely is not taking over until Mark Andrews is gone, if he takes over at all. Mark Andrews is still the alpha tight end in that room, and he's going to return 15 to 17 points per game, just like he always does. And if you're getting him outside of the top 10, smash that button.
A great call. Essentially, when the whole entire hive is out on Mark Andrews, you have to go and veer in the opposite direction. All last year in best ball, everyone was fading the passing game of Justin Herbert and the Chargers, but there was value to be squeezed there. And we're going all the way out on Mark Andrews as if he actually did something bad to us, because the early onset for the season, which Bradley had phenomenal car accident analysis for Mark Andrews. And you're bringing up a salient point, bigz, that, hey, he really did have that, and it had an effect. So to your point, that first month, it's not just like piecing together what we like or don't like, because prior years we have the production of Mark Andrews. If you slice that up, that puts him back to, like Bill Parcells says, the back of your stats are what you are. And that's what Mark Andrews had going on. It's just hidden. It's so crazy in fantasy. In the playoffs, Mark Andrews had that drop pass, and it hurt the Ravens from advancing on, hopefully for the Super Bowl. But he didn't really do anything to anybody's fantasy football team. It's kind of crazy how much the dislike or hate or wanting to push Mark Andrews out has gone. So to your point, I think that has gone way too far.
I call that the Sam Darnold paradox. Fantastic throughout the fantasy season. He got owned in one game against the top defense in the NFL. What are you going to do? We watched it happen to Jared Goff in the Super Bowl against New England. They were highly prolific, and all of a sudden one game plan took him out, and nobody thought Jared Goff, including his head coach, was a good quarterback anymore. Well, that's what happened to Sam Darnold last year. He's going to be fine in Seattle, just like Jared Goff was fine when he made it to Detroit.
All right. So my player, it's going to be Elijah Moore, and people will be like, oh my God, Elijah Moore, puke, that's so disgusting. But price point right now, I got him in the 23rd round of our startup, and the players who are around there, we're talking like, let's see, Adam Thielen, Dontavian Wicks, Riley Leonard, Luke Schoonmaker, Taysom Hill, Tyler Higbee, Justice Hill. So it wasn't like I was necessarily branching out so far in that range, just paying the price that's there. And then on Underdog, you can get Elijah Moore round 18. My question would be, and I said this on the show a couple months ago, but what's more likely? Elijah Moore can't play football, or the Jets and the Browns are incompetent franchises? And when you ask it that way, based on, if I just asked, hey, is Elijah Moore really that good? People would be like, he's just kind of here. But then when you put it side by side with that question against the competency of the Jets and the Browns, then it becomes a little more in favor of Elijah Moore. We're getting good reports about Elijah Moore from Buffalo. And wouldn't it just be fitting that he's tied to a great offense with a great quarterback, and he can run value from the price point where you're getting him? So, if I wanted to say a crazy hot take, it would be something like Josh Allen turns Elijah Moore into a high wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. But we don't even have to go there, because price point on round 23 in a startup and round 18 in best ball, he can return weeks easily. And then from my price point, if I go to a point where I can sell Elijah Moore for a second round pick in 26, huge profit from that standpoint. So I would just say, look out for Elijah Moore. Anybody can tell you to go draft Brian Thomas Jr. Anybody can tell you to go draft Jaden Daniels. So this pocket and tier, this is just nobody. find the person who's talking about Elijah Moore like I am right now. And hey, they're probably just a wonderful human being, but can you find them? Because I don't know where they are. And that's my take. All right. So remember my face when Elijah Moore returns value.
So I'm going to put it out there. These are the two guys that I took in that round before Elijah Moore, Raheem Sanders and Taysom Hill. And then the pick directly after Elijah Moore, Adam Thielen.
And to me, they're all good picks, but I'm just contending Elijah Moore is a great pick at that round.
I'm going to say Adam Thielen leads that quadro in points this year.
That's something we'll just have to watch, because
that's what I'm saying.
Your point with Bryce Young and his ascendance, I've been high on Jalen Coker, but is this just going to be a situation where Adam Thielen does well for 5-6 weeks, hits a hammy, and then he just kind of fades just due to age? Yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at Joe Brady, I think they bring in Elijah Moore because they brought in Curtis Samuel last year and it didn't work out, but I think that's the role that they have envisioned for him. And Joe Brady, had success with Curtis Samuel back in Carolina. So, I mean, yeah, this could work. I don't have an issue here. My one concern is there's just a lot of mouths to feed in that wide receiver room now with no true alpha. Now we're looking at Keon Coleman to take a jump here. But I mean, you still got Khalil Shakir and, they brought Josh Palmer in. There's just a lot of dudes, right? But to your point, round 23, take that stab.
Right.
And it's ambiguous on a Super Bowl contending team. So if I want to make this point for somebody, I want to make it on a less clarity wide receiver room. So that's where I'm placing a lot of things in the direction. It still has to come to fruition. Elijah Moore still has to do the work, and I'm personally rooting for him. And the beauty is I'm not paying some high dollar cost.
It's way easier.
I like that you said they brought in Curtis Samuel and it didn't work out. So now they brought in Elijah Moore to not work out.
I mean, it's very plausible. But the path to some sort of fantasy relevance here is it's there especially when you compare to some other dudes in that range.
And talking about, back burner players, he's somebody who, if he's on somebody's roster who they never got to sell from those first 2 seasons, they've been just cooking, simmering on low heat for a long time. You might be able to get out. Okay. You might, this might be the year if it is, or you'll have a dead asset if not.
You also, 1 second before you get into your guy Schultzy, you mentioned the Bills as a Super Bowl contender, but they got to get through teams like the Jags and the Raiders and the Titans before they can even get to that stage. So before you put them in that same category,
I'm not saying he's Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's move on.
Nobody is.
Who's your guy, buddy?
We're jumping up to the front right burner here, the prime real estate on the stove, and we're talking Davante Adams. Now, when he first signed with the Rams, it was kind of a sneaky play, but at this point, everybody's talking. We're all talking about him. We all love him. We're pitching tents in the brick aisle, and we're not leaving until the cops get called. All right. I mean, this guy just took him. We talked about I got him in the 9th round of the Grindberg Invitational. Now, if you're looking at the sleeper queue, he was pretty far down on the sleeper list when I took him. I kind of considered maybe waiting for the 10th, but I knew with this group of guys, that wasn't happening. So 10th round might be possible on this guy, depending on who you're playing with.
No, I'm telling you right now, he went in the 7th in the last startup I did last weekend.
Snap.
So your 9th pick, which he was coming to me in the 9th in that invitational. I was going to pick him in the 7th, but I got sniped.
That's crazy. He's okay. So we're really steaming him up, but the tents are still pitched and we aren't leaving. Okay. Every year since 2020, this is a top 12 wide receiver. He's done it on 3 different teams. He's done it with different quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Aiden O'Connell, Ayahuasca Aaron, you name it. This guy's producing. He is 32, but he's not a guy who is relying on burning you to win. He's just a student of the game and a route technician, and that carries on. He's a touchdown machine. I expect that to keep up. He's getting a huge offensive upgrade than what he's had the last handful of years. Going back to 2016, he hasn't dropped, I had mentioned the touchdown machine here. 8 touchdowns or more every year, except for one, going back to 2016. And that was because he played 12 games. Offensive upgrade. He feels rejuvenized coming over to the Rams, man. Being on a winning team and winning culture. He's playing with Puka, but we've seen Puka miss a bunch of time. And this is also the offense that we have seen produce 3 fringe wide receiver 1 seasons out of Robert freaking Woods. Okay. So talent-wise, Davante Adams blows Robert Woods out of the water. This offense can handle it, and they will handle it. Now, last point here is we just had a tweet from JJ Zakariason a handful of days ago. Rams wide receiver target share ranks since Sean McVay got to LA. 8th, 5th, 6th, 8th, 1st, 4th, 1st, and 1st. Rams wide receiver fantasy points during that time. 5th, 4th, 4th, 12th, 1st, 15th, 3rd, and 2nd. So those 12th and 15th years, they had some injuries, and there's been outside factors. The teams weren't as good those years. But when the Rams are clicking and they're a competitive team, they are pumping out wide receiver numbers like crazy. And to add a talent like Davante Adams, we're going to the moon, guys.
Hey, nose goes.
Nose goes with the moonshine. Chev, you got anything to add to that, buddy?
Well, the one thing that I was going to add to that, if Schultzy didn't leave any crumbs, which he did not. So Schultzy hit me with the JJ Zakariason tweet, and that was all I was going to add to this. It's a beautiful point. Davante Adams, 17 points a game last year with Aaron Rodgers. He steps into a situation that's better. It's a concentrated target share, and I think that he's being extremely undervalued for what he can represent in your lineup. It doesn't seem like he's faced any sort of decline. It's an upgrade from Cooper Kupp. They use the most condensed splits in the entire NFL. And they're really creative about getting their wide receivers into space and keeping them from being able to get pressed. So I think all of this alludes to a massive breakout for Davante Adams, a re-breakout, if you will, or just the standard of excellency and consistency of a Hall of Famer that he's going to bring to your lineups in 2025.
Okay.
Follow up.
Okay. I've got a trade on the docket that is on a team that won a championship this year. So it's a championship caliber team already. And there's an inbox trade. Davante Adams and Derrick Henry for my 27 first, my 26 second, and Aaron Jones.
And you can get them to win now again.
Oh, I'm doing that.
Yeah, do it, because that person, look, hey, they want Jeremiah Smith, but you got to, are you going to lock down all 12, 27 ones? Sure, go for that, but that's a lot of gambling when you could just run back to back. I like the...
Yeah, that team's got Jamar Chase, Drake London, Ladd McConkey, Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, Bo Nix, Travis Kelce.
That's how you take advantage of this Jeremiah Smith. I
was saying it's a lot of future for now, and if one of those guys go down, so I mean, I'm still contemplating it, but that's something that I'll think about as we finish off this show here, bigz, and tell everybody what's going on at the FSAN and what's going on Undroppables and where we can find all our stuff.
Well, at both of those places, there's a lot of people who are working really hard to bring you the best fantasy content on the planet, especially the best fantasy content available here on YouTube and also on terrestrial radio. Speaking of which, if you are listening on 101.5 FM, go ahead and go to YouTube and look up Fantasy Sports Advice and also the Undroppables and find that content, because it's really, really good. Uncovered as well. Uncovered is fantastic. And if you're listening down in Tennessee and you want to do your own your own show for your team that's not the Titans, go ahead and give us a ring, and we'll that's old people speak for call us on the telephone. Other than that, go to fantasysportsadvice.com, get your pro membership today, get qualified for those jersey leagues, and other than that, I hope you win.
Peace out, everybody.